Let's get this show started. And how wonderful. Facebook is just telling us we are live. So welcome one and all, yet again. It's Wednesday. I was just saying, what are we doing with Fridays and Sundays now? It's quite unusual since we're doing these shows 3 times a week, and now we're getting back to once a week. Very enjoyable, though, to have all you wonderful people joining us yet again. Thanks for tuning in. Another exciting Light 'em Up show and another wonderful guest. Tonight we have Laurel Tilly from Macanudo Cigars with us. I'm honored that we have another exceptional cigar lady at the show tonight, and we had quite a few. But Laura, thank you so much for tuning in, Laurel, and thanks for being part of the Light 'em Up show.
Of course, thanks for the invite.
It's a pleasure to have you joining us. As always, for all of you people out there watching us through Facebook, please be most kindly invited to share all your questions, all your thoughts and comments just underneath the live video, underneath the live stream. I'll be checking all of them, and we will forward all your questions and comments to Laurel and bring them into the conversation. Actually, Laurel, I would love to kick things off with quite a funny coincidence, because I realized and I read that you smoked your first cigar at your 18th birthday. Is that right?
It is correct.
So did I. And I still most fondly remember that day. I was putting on like a black suit and a tie and went to my local tobacconist, bought a very cheap, or let's say inexpensive, machine-made short filler cigar, and I went to a classic cocktail bar in the city center of Vienna and just felt like a grown-up, and it was such a wonderful experience. I just wanted to ask you, what was your experience like, and what were your expectations and aspirations when you lit up that very first cigar?
So I did not have really any familiarity with cigars or the culture or anything surrounding it before I had my first cigar. I had gone out to dinner for my birthday with my boyfriend at the time, and him and some of our other friends were a little bit older, they were like 6 months older. So they had been smoking cigars for about 6 months because they wanted to be cool and do something now that they were adults. We still couldn't drink. So it was, okay, what can we do to really solidify the fact that we're adults now? So they had taken up cigars. And after dinner, now mind you, my birthday is in January and I live in Wisconsin, so it's very, very cold. And this was kind of on the cusp of when everything started going non-smoking. So we had to sit outside. So we got back from dinner after stopping at the gas station, and we got a 5-pack of Grenadiers. Now, you could have handed me a $100 cigar or a $1 cigar, and I would have had no idea the difference or what I should be expecting. So when you ask about my expectations, I honestly don't think I had any, because I didn't even know what I was getting into. And like you, I remember it very, very vividly, like having to go out on the porch, wipe off the snow. We lit up the cigar, and I remember not really enjoying it, but liking the experience. And I thought it was something fun that I could continue to do, but there were just a lot of factors that did not make my first smoking experience ideal. So then I'm from a pretty small town in Wisconsin originally, so we didn't have any big cigar lounges or shops in the area. So we were able to find a shop that carried, ironically, CAO. So CAO was one of the first cigars that I really started out on, and expanded my palate from there. And then when I moved to Milwaukee for college, I stumbled upon a cigar shop that kind of introduced me to the wonderful world of premium cigars, and then the rest is history. But yeah, it was kind of a rocky start, to be honest. I don't think at that moment I would have ever anticipated being as involved in cigars as I am now, for sure.
Now, Macanudo Cigars is an iconic brand, and you've become the face of the brand as a young, enthusiastic cigar expert, as an exceptional cigar lady. But how does it feel for you to represent such a long-standing tradition and such a legacy-rich brand?
Honestly, sometimes I think I have to kind of look at it from an outside perspective, because I enjoy it. I interact with customers. We go and do events, or I'll do videos and trainings and whatnot. But to your point, I sometimes do forget that Macanudo is such a powerhouse brand. And it's very humbling because as much as I enjoy it, sometimes I have to be cognizant of the fact that it's huge domestically, it's huge international. There's a lot of people who have had they've been smoking Macanudo for the last 30 years. So then I need to be conscious of, am I conveying the brand in a way that we want it to be conveyed? And am I making sure to give enough love to everything that we produce, not just the Inspirato or anything that would be newer for our portfolio? So like I said, it's exciting, it's humbling, and sometimes I wonder how I even got to this point to start with, but I do very much enjoy it.
Now, actually, this is a very good question. So how about you try to answer that for us, how you actually got there?
So when I moved to Milwaukee for college, the cigar shop that I was a part of as a customer was hiring. And at the time I had stopped going to school for a couple of years while I was trying to figure out what to do. And I was working a bunch of odd jobs, and I was a customer there for about 2 years. I really enjoyed the products. I had expanded my cigar scope. I've smoked at that point a lot of premium cigars, kind of had a better handle on what they were all about, and really just kind of connected with the culture of it. So when I found out that they had a part-time position opening up, I kind of campaigned for a job there. And I was there all the time because I was the only one of my friends like working in Milwaukee at the time. So I would spend so much time there. And I eventually got a job, and after a couple of months, I was offered a full-time position. And then over my time there, which was about 6 years, I became kind of like the social media and events person, as well as like purchasing, like bringing in new products. And it just kind of further solidified my love for the industry. And then I ended up going back to college and finishing up my last 2 years of undergrad and getting a degree in advertising and public relations. And as I was kind of nearing the point where I was going to be graduating, people were approaching me asking if I was going to stay in the cigar industry. And I was like, I mean, I'd love to, but there's just not that many positions, especially in something that's more of like a marketing, advertising, PR standpoint, not simply just sales. Like obviously there's a sales component to this position, but it's a little bit of a wider or a broader scope of what I do, I suppose. And then we had a rep who used to work in that territory for Alec Bradley, and he's really good friends with the rep who works in Chicago for us, and they had posted a position internally for an event manager. And our rep, Matt, reached out to this gentleman, Dave, who had reached out to me and said they're looking for somebody in this territory to run events. And I was like, great, I graduate in 3 months. If they're willing to wait, I would love to work there. And I honestly had no expectations that I would even get the job. I sent along my resume kind of as like a Hail Mary. I'm like, well, if it goes somewhere, great. And it obviously ended up going somewhere, which is amazing. So I started out as an event manager, and then a couple months into the position, they had approached me about becoming an ambassador. So they had kind of talked to me about what brands I'd be interested in working on and what that would entail. And I started in October of 2016 at the company, and I took over the ambassador position in August of the following year. So I am rounding out 3 years for Macanudo, and then it'll be 4 years total in October for the company.
Now, with that very particular experience of yours entering the cigar industry and obviously working in retail before, how did that sort of change your perspective and change just how you see the industry as a whole now working with a particular brand?
So that's a great question. I was really excited to kind of come from the retail aspect of it. I feel like I had a little bit more of a well-rounded experience and not just dealing with like one manufacturer in particular, but seeing kind of the market trends overall, not just from one brand, and being able to visit factories, not our own, and then coming to General and then seeing our processes. So just having that comparison and having that just that broader knowledge of what I feel like is the industry as a whole. And we work so much with retailers, especially when I first started in an event manager position, that I could say, well, my time behind the counter on that end, this is what works, this is what didn't work. And not saying that's like a catch-all for everybody, but I think it brought a unique perspective to coming to work for a manufacturer and then being on kind of both sides of the counter there.
And I think you had probably quite a lot of boutique brands during
Yes.
your experience at retail. And obviously then you joined a powerhouse with Macanudo and the company behind it. How's that different? Or would you say that just the experience with all those boutique manufacturers really gave you a different sort of view on what Macanudo was doing as well?
Well, and to be honest, we were a very boutique heavy store. So we carried General, we carried Altadis. And actually my first Macanudo was the 1968. So we didn't even do a lot of the cafe series. We had more of like the 1968, the Cru Royale, like the Maduro. So I think that starting with General and then going down and seeing our factories and seeing the processes and the passion and the history, and some of these people working at the factories, they've been there for 20 plus years, or their second or third generation. And I think there's this misconception about just because you're a bigger company means you lose sight of kind of the passion that goes into cigar making. And to be honest, I never held that perception of larger companies. It just, to me, it seems like you're taking, a boutique company and then just everything that they do, you just have to make it bigger. So by going to General and really seeing everybody and talking to the brand teams down in the DR in Honduras was very eye-opening, just to see that a larger manufacturer like us does all the same things, just bigger.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And sometimes it feels like, I mean, I come from the wine and spirits industry originally. And even there, the whole craft movement and sort of boutique craft, whatever you might call it, these terms get thrown around quite a lot, and they have some marketing appeal probably. And of course, there's some reason behind it, and there's depth to it.
Yeah.
But big does not necessarily mean not craft or boutique, and
Yeah.
small and vice versa does not necessarily mean high quality. Or how do you define boutique for yourself? What does that actually mean for you?
And I think it's very subjective. I guess if we look at boutique companies, I see like three levels of cigar companies. You have like the major players, like the biggest production, whether that be in cigar sales or number of brands. And then you have the guys who started out boutique, but who have been around for long enough, kind of at like the boutique boom. We saw it here with kind of like the peak of like boutique spirits, like craft beers, craft spirits, and the same with other industries. But you have the guys who started out as boutique and now they're kind of that like mid-level, like it's difficult to say if they're boutique. And then you have the guys who, I guess I would consider boutique to be like not overly ubiquitous in distribution all over the country. You might have, it's like we had a regional brand out of Chicago and it was very strong in the Midwest, but not a lot of people outside of the Midwest really knew about it. And then you have the same thing, like you have clusters on the East Coast or the West Coast or in the southern states where it's more of like a regionally known thing, and not saying that it's not as good of a cigar or shouldn't get the distribution, but I would see more boutique as that, or just very intermittent accounts where, if you're looking at a range of 20 accounts, maybe only one or two places carry that particular brand.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm just curious, what was actually your perception of Macanudo as a brand before you joined them as an employee?
So, like I said, we didn't carry too much of General product overall. We had some Hoyo, some Punch, some La Gloria, and Macanudo. I really, really enjoyed the 1968. I enjoyed the 1968 out of the gate. That was the first Macanudo that I smoked, and there were some other people at the store who they weren't a huge fan of the cafe because it was too mellow. And while I would say that in general that cigar is a little bit mellower than I enjoy smoking all the time, you have to be objective about it and say, like, it might not be to my taste, but it's still a great cigar. So for me, that's a fantastic morning cigar. But I always enjoyed Macanudo. Like I said, the 1968, the Coriel, and the Maduros are kind of what I started out on. And really the first cigar to kind of put General on the map for me as a company was the Hoy de Monterey, the Hoya Day Tradition. That for me really just opened up the floodgates for like, wow, this is an amazing cigar. And there's a lot of really, really great cigars coming from here. And we kind of expanded our portfolio over time in my years there. But yeah, I mean, I guess to make a short answer long here, I didn't really have a perception of it one way or another. Like I said, I enjoyed the 1968s and I enjoyed the other brands and the other lines that the company was producing. So, you know, overall positive.
That's great. You shortly described that, of course, over the period of time, and even during your time with Macanudo, the portfolio grew quite substantially. When you look back at the history of Macanudo as a whole, what, in your opinion, were some of the quintessential evolution and turning points that really make Macanudo what it is today?
So if we're looking in more recent history, 100% the Inspirato line. So I'm smoking the Inspirato Orange here, and it was originally blended for the European market because Macanudo being an international brand, we have, you know, our branch over there that develops cigars specifically for the international market. And it was really a pivotal point for Macanudo because typically when people heard the name, it was kind of synonymous with the Cafe series. And circling back to what we were talking about earlier, a lot of people are saying, well, it's a good cigar, but it's a little bit too mellow. I smoked that 20 years ago and I have since moved on. Well, the Inspirato series was just this breath of fresh air for the brand. So with the success of the orange in Europe, we brought it to the States. And then we actually released the white and the black and the red here all up before or into 2018. And then those have since gone back over into the international market. And then we soon have the Inspirato green. So the line, that branch of Inspirato, it's really bringing new light and more unique blending, different tobaccos, and kind of telling everybody that Macanudo is not your grandfather's cigar. It's not what you smoked 10 years ago, 20 years, even 5 years ago. I mean, we didn't bring the orange into the States until 2016. So it's been incredibly successful, and I think it's really changing the perception of what the brand is. And of course, we would never want to discount some of our core lines that really still are bread and butter, like the Cafe series. But this is giving smokers the ability to maybe start on the Cafe series or our Inspirato white and then move to the orange or the black or the red, something a little bit fuller bodied. So they're not moving away from Macanudo, they're kind of moving throughout the line. And then back at our acquisition, when we brought it to the United States, the Colemans, who acquired Macanudo, really took the brand and did something different with it. They put it in every hotel, golf course, country club, anywhere that you could really sell cigars and it made sense. And that, again, was kind of a pivotal point for the brand because it brought so much attention to this brand because it was everywhere. And I think that's why, I know that's why Macanudo is what it is today and why it is such a powerhouse brand, because they really hit the streets with it early on. So those are kind of what I see as the defining moments for the brand.
Quite interesting that you actually launched that Inspirato in Europe, right? Mm-hmm. Before you actually went to the United States with it. What was the inspiration behind that, or the thought process?
So just coming up with something that could, again, give a breath, breathe new life into the brand, a brand that we wanted to kind of keep up with market trends. Again, Macanudo is never going to be boutique, but we're able to source tobaccos from really interesting places. Like the one we've got coming out in August here, the green, we're using Brazilian Arapiraca, which is the first time we've ever used that tobacco for Macanudo. And as we're not fortunate to have Cubans be legal here, but there's obviously the Cuban competition. So this was blended to sort of compete with that. We needed to source tobaccos and do a blending style that would be able to hold its own next to its Cuban counterparts and kind of deliver that Cubanesque smoke that you would expect. And it does a phenomenal job. It's honestly my favorite out of all of them. And it's probably tied with the 1968 as being my favorite Macanudo. But yeah, it was, again, just to kind of bring more awareness to the brand as being new and innovative, and then also keeping up with the cigars and being able to properly compete with what is available in the international market.
We have a great follow-up question on that from Leo, who is here at the lounge. Leo, welcome back and thanks for tuning in. Please raise your question.
Yes, nice to meet you and greeting from France.
Nice to meet you, Leo.
Yeah, just last week they released from Cigar's Cup, and I get the new Macanudo Inspirato, the green one, a Robusto, okay. And I saw on the journal from Cigar's Cup, they just said they don't taste it, but I get one and the taste is pretty cool. Why did you think to use like Brazilian wrappers and also with Indonesian tobacco and also from the filler from Dominican? What it was the idea behind? Because I was light up it with my dad, and the first puff we get a lot of smoke suddenly. I imagine it was more smooth, more light, but the smoke was kind of like heavy and the fog was very heavy. What is the idea between and behind this new Macanudo?
So the Inspirato Green is kind of, the blend we use is really rounding out the entire portfolio we have. And as far as kind of market trends here, the flavor profile, or at least the strength profile, tends to be kind of in that medium plus as being the sweet spot. So developing something that is going to kind of cast a wider net for smokers. So if you're a newer smoker, it's not anything that's going to be overly heavy, whereas if you're a seasoned smoker, it's still going to hold your interest enough. And then we wanted to use the Brazilian tobacco to kind of bring a new aspect to the Inspirato line. There's only two other cigars.
The smell is amazing. The smell raw is very impressive, and like sometimes feeling like some cigars are very the same. For example, with all the Brazilian, the wrapper, if we take the example with a CAO, who use a Brazilian, or we see also with different other brand, also Brazilian wrapper, is pretty impressive. It's very linked, and I really like the taste, but I wanted to know like more details about it, because in the Cigar's Cup we have just released in France that they never tasted, so we have no information and just the price and the wrapper, and that's it. I mean, like I was just curious to know about it more.
Sorry, about the what?
I was more curious about to know more about this cigar. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, thankfully we have access to a lot of Brazilian tobacco. We use it for our CAO brand. So like I said, the Arapiraca is not something we've ever used for Macanudo before, but like I said, it's something that we were able to get in enough of a quantity to maintain a big launch such as the Inspirato Green. And yeah, like I said, it was something that we wanted to use to kind of like round out that flavor and give it a uniqueness to the line. You've smoked it. It's got a really interesting balance of earthiness, sweetness, a little bit of spice. So there's really nothing else that's overly comparable to it. There's something about Brazilian tobacco in particular that you can't swap it for another wrapper and say that it's comparable, because it really stands on its own.
Okay, thank you very much. It was very, very good, and like it's nice to know more about it. And then when I see Reinhard just last out the things, and I just smoked these cigars, I like, let's see what is the story behind, and the story is pretty cool. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Laurel, just to sort of prolong that discussion and that question, Peter Yekov had an excellent question over on Facebook, and I want to say hello to Peter and all the people from Cigar Lounge UK. Great job that they're doing over there. Peter was asking, is Macanudo intending to use a Cameroon wrapper in the future?
You know, I'm not sure. So typically we are developing blends. We start kind of looking at the concept 2 or 3 years in advance. I know that, like, to use a true African Cameroon, it's fairly expensive and it's fairly limited. I know that we use a Cameroon wrapper for some of our Cohibas and some of our CAOs. So a lot of the Cameroon that we're sourcing is being allocated for those blends that already exist, or developing something new under a Cameroon line for a brand that already is kind of donning a Cameroon wrapper. So maybe at this point we don't have anything in the works with a Cameroon wrapper, but it's not saying that somewhere down the line it won't be a possibility. You know, of course, we're going to continue to innovate with Macanudo. We'll keep having new products out. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely not out of the question, but just currently we don't have anything in the works.
Do you have a particular sweet spot for certain types of tobacco or certain aromatic profiles?
Yeah, so I personally love Cameroon while we're on that subject. So Rick Rodriguez, I think you've done one of these with him, correct?
Of course, yeah.
From
With
CAO?
we did our show.
So he is not a big Cameroon fan, and that's where we always differ, because I think there's just something so unique about Cameroon. But as far as a flavor profile goes, I tend to like a medium-bodied cigar with just something that's very complex. If it has a little bit of a natural sweetness to it, something that's going to be very dynamic and kind of changes as you get through it. My big thing is I just don't want a cigar to taste exactly the same from foot to cap. So the orange from the Macanudo series is my favorite. As far as like taste goes, I really enjoy the Ometepe region from Nicaragua. There is just something very interesting about that volcanic soil that just gives it such an intense flavor. And again, another flavor that you can pick out. Like, that's one of those tobaccos that I could do a blind taste test and always know that's Ometepe, because it has such a distinct flavor to it. I tend to enjoy Sumatra as well, whether it be for a wrapper or any other component of the cigar. I feel like it gives it a real nice sweetness and kind of balances out the rest of the blend nicely. So I definitely have my favorites. There's not a ton of tobaccos that I don't like. I don't like something that's overly peppery. You know, using pepper to compensate for, I guess, like a lack of complexity. I don't like. I'm fine with pepper, but I need there to be more to it. Kind of like spicy food. I'm good with spicy food, but the food needs to have other flavors going on. I don't want just spice. So I tend to steer away from like a Criollo wrapper would probably be my least favorite.
It's quite interesting that you mentioned some of these different sort of sensory nuances that you get from the cigars, and quite often at the show we actually have discussions with our different guests. And since I'm part of the blind tasting panel from Cigar Journal, you know, even there and speaking with other people, we have a lot of discussions where some would say a cigar tastes of tobacco first and foremost, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have sort of the other end of the scale, sort of the more half-wheel approach, if you will,
yeah,
where it's like burnt leaves of maple on a foggy autumn day, sort of, right?
Very specific, yes.
Where would you, in sort of which end of the scale would you see yourself in, especially since you're doing tastings, events, seminars with cigar aficionados in the United States? So how do you go about talking about all those different sensory elements?
So I would definitely say that I fall somewhere in the middle. I think early on, there wasn't a lot of distinction for me for cigars. It was either I liked it or I didn't, but I didn't necessarily know why. So it kind of fell on me to really evaluate what I was tasting, and especially if you can retrohale and kind of really open up your palate to the fullest and experience it that way. So also, when I started in this position, Rick sent me this nice little gift. It was basically like a cigar pairing kit. So it was a bunch of different scents and kind of a guideline for what you should or should not taste in a cigar. So yeah, some of them were a little odd, but yeah, like I said, I would fall somewhere in the middle, whereas sometimes I have a difficulty pinpointing the flavor exactly. So I was smoking a cigar the other day and I knew it had a nuttiness to it, but I couldn't like really pinpoint exactly what it was. So a lot of times I'll actually like employ my husband. I was like, smoke this and tell me what you think. Go into it, like try not to think too much about it. What sort of flavors are you getting? And he'll say like, oh, I think this has more like cashew to it. I was like, God, that's exactly what it is. So I'm less on the specific flavors, but more on like the smoking experience. So it's smooth, it's spicy, or it has a lot of smoke production, or a little bit of a natural sweetness to it, or it's got the nuttiness or an earthiness. Whereas I'm not as specifically saying like, oh, it tastes exactly like 27-day ripened maraschino cherries. Like I'm not that specific.
Because that's super subjective. I mean,
Yeah,
is a very subjective process, and I always say it's like finding a vocabulary in order to express what it is that you're perceiving.
yes.
And that sort of takes a bit of training, or at least getting acquainted with your sensory capabilities, and then finding some analogies and the right wording for it. And everybody's experience is different. If I tell you my cigar tastes and smells like heather honey, and you've never seen heather honey in your life, that wouldn't be any good for you, or you wouldn't have any reference to that. So
exactly.
I think we all need to sort of find our own vocabulary, but that's the beauty of it all, that we're all going on a treasure hunt for these different nuances in order to make our experiences shareable, and talk to other people and share these wonderful experiences. So I'm all into that, and creating holistic experiences based off of that is really something I think the premium cigar industry could dig in a little deeper. We've all been to the pairings, obviously, and
Yes.
it's about your rum and your scotch and your
Mhm.
cognac with a particular cigar. But there's so many more options, and
Yes.
experiences, as you perfectly said, they're holistic, and it's about all our senses.
Yeah, it's amazing how much of a difference a pairing can make. I usually maintain that like as long as you're drinking or eating something that isn't overpowering the cigar, and on the other hand your cigar isn't overpowering whatever you're eating and drinking, you can find some interesting combos. But I've had some real doozies of pairings before that both ruined the drink and the cigar, so it does make a big difference.
And what I think is super interesting is that pairings can actually help you finding some of those analogies, or finding the right vocabularies. I've always done events and cigar experiences where people be like, well, just based off of your pairing recommendations, I can sort of relate to that and find a particular smell or aromatic sensation now in regards to that cigar. I know you're not fond of pickles, right? That is something you can't stand. Have you ever experienced that in a cigar, for example? So I think adversity can also be a good indicator for an aroma, because you pick it up so easily.
Yeah. Well, and it always drove me crazy when somebody would ask, what's the best cigar? I'm like, well, what the best cigar is for me isn't necessarily going to be what the best cigar is for you. And so you must have gone back and like watched another interview or something, because I use pickles as a reference because I cannot stand them. Like cannot. If they touch my fries, I will not eat those fries. So that's one of those things where most of my friends think I'm crazy. And like, well, that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion, and I am entitled to mine. That's why there's a bunch of different foods, and that's why we make a bunch of different cigars, because everybody's experience is going to be different. And like you were saying with, the honey, if I go to someone and say, oh, this cigar tastes like Honey Nut Cheerios, and then you're kind of putting this idea in their mind of what they're supposed to taste. So if they do taste it, then you're saying like, okay, well, am I just like planting this thought in your mind where you think you should be tasting this, and your mind is basically telling you that you are, or you're going to smoke it and say, well, this doesn't taste like Honey Nut Cheerios, so obviously I'm not getting out of it what I should, and then maybe not continuing to smoke that cigar in the future. So I really don't ever want to tell anybody what they should or should not taste. I will speak to my own experiences, and then there's some pretty broad ones where if the cigar is spicy, I feel like most people can agree that it's a spicy cigar. Some people might not think it's as spicy as another person would because they just have a different threshold, but it's all very personal. And that's the same for cigars, that is for food, alcohol, whatever it may be.
And that's the beauty of the cigar industry
Mm-hmm.
and that global cigar family that we're all part of, that it's such a caring and sharing community. And it's not about being, you know, that smart ass and knowing everything and being like, I picked up this, and if you don't smell it or taste it, then you got no clue about cigars, right?
Yeah.
It's ultimately, we're all in this together. And I think the more enjoyable, the more shareable, and sometimes educational we can make things, but with a good intent,
Yeah.
the more beautiful it is, I think.
And I don't think it matters if you know anything about cigars. I mean, obviously certain people have to have more knowledge than others, I suppose. But I have friends who are cigar novice, and they've admitted, like, oh, you know, I feel uncomfortable smoking around you. I feel like I just don't know enough. Like, you don't have to know anything. If you enjoy it, great. If you have questions, ask me. If you want to know more, of course, I can talk to you about that. But you don't have to know where the wrapper, the binder, the filler is, what are the processes, what was the exact temperature of that day that this tobacco was harvested from the stalk. Like, you know, I don't know a lot about wine. I will be candid about that. I adore wine. It's my drink of choice, but I would be considered a total novice. Like, I know nothing. I just know what I like and I don't like, and I don't really know why. But that doesn't stop me from enjoying the wine. That just stops me from having an intellectual conversation about wine.
Laurel, actually, it's a wonderful thing that you bring up here, and thanks for mentioning that. When you started with Macanudo and becoming the face of the brand, did you ever feel like people were not taking you for real or not taking you seriously? Because there comes this young, charming lady talking to all the old guys, they've been there, done that, with the cigar industry for 40 years or something. And then you show up and be like, let's talk about cigars. Was there ever any sort of adversity or, you know, any negative preconcept?
I mean, it would be a lie to say that there wasn't, but I will say overall, the cigar industry is very welcoming and very accepting. And you might have some people off the bat who maybe are like internally questioning my credibility. I will say that there was not very many people who would outwardly say, like, I don't trust you, what do you know? I actually got that more on the retail side, but when I started in retail, I was also 19. So, I mean, I was very, very young when I started retail. But it has, I think at this point in my career with General, I've been around long enough, and people who are coming to events have either been to an event before or seen me online, or they simply see a poster advertising the event with my face on it. And I've actually had somebody tell me, like, well, I didn't know how much you would know about cigars, but I saw your face on the poster and I figured they wouldn't put you there if you didn't know what you were talking about. Well, I mean, I appreciate the foresight on that. So a little bit, yes, but like I said, overall, people are very kind and respectful. And even if they're hesitant in the beginning, I think when they go to the event, and I'm not trying to sound like conceited here, like, oh, and they come to the event and they start talking to me, but we do an educational seminar, a fuma tasting. So we're in our 4th year of doing it. So the first year was wrapper, binder, filler, and then all wrappers, and then different countries of origin. So sitting in on this seminar and really kind of getting into the weeds about the tobacco processes, it's very, I don't know, it's very validating, and also it's so kind when people come up and they say, you know, I've been into cigars for 20 years, and I've learned more from your presentation than I've learned over the last 20 years of just smoking cigars as a hobby. And that is really, it makes me feel good, because I want to spread the joy of cigars, and I personally think that it's interesting. There's so many different aspects of it, and there's so much to know and so much to learn, and I'm still learning. Every time I go down to the factory, I'm still acquiring new knowledge, and occasionally I'll get a question. Somebody asks me, I'm like, you know what? I don't know the answer to that, but I will find out, and that helps me continue to grow. So yeah, overall, people have been very good, very respectful, and very receptive to kind of coming in and getting a more in-depth education on the brand and the blends. So
that's a wonderful point. Thank you. I would love to bring in a question from Christian, who is here at the Light 'em Up Lounge.
all right.
Hi, Laurel. How are you doing?
Hi, Christian. Well, how are you?
I am good. Dialing in all the way from Ghana and West Africa. So clearly you have a large following. I remember a couple of months ago, there was a new Inspirato Palladium that was due to come out.
Yes.
I haven't heard anything since. Is it out? Was it released? And what's the story behind it?
So the Palladium is a limited release blend. So we did it last year at our trade show, which is in July. And then I believe we started shipping it in like September. So the Palladium will be a yearly release. It'll be out in the fall again this year, but we only do 3,000 boxes of it. So while it is a blend that we've released and we will continue to do, it's not terribly ubiquitous because of the box count or the amount of boxes that we produce, which, like I said, is only 3,000. And I don't believe we do it outside of the United States. So.
Okay. Good. Thanks for that.
Yeah. So I apologize.
That's fine.
Yes,
I'm sure I'll find a
one.
stick at least somewhere.
Oh, I'm sure. And I'm sure online as well. But yeah, I would start looking for it. I think we're releasing it in October of this year.
Okay. Good to know. Okay.
Christian,
Thanks.
many thanks for tuning in, and thanks for being part of the show. It's so wonderful to see, you know, folks from all over the place, be it Southeast Asia, from Africa, Europe, the United States. I'm beyond grateful that you're all tuning in and that you're all part of our wonderful Light 'em Up family here. And so thank you all for your continued support and for being part of the show.
Thanks.
Speaking of, let's jump right to the UK. You know, one of our most loyal regulars, Ian, you had a question. Fire away, my friend.
Hi, Laurel. Great to meet you, and thanks for your enthusiasm. I wish my wife smoked cigars, and even better if she was in the cigar business, because that must be great for your husband. But
He does love it.
I actually have a question. I've had a few Macanudos. I've had the Hyde Park and a few others.
Okay.
And it's a question about, I mean, I like mild cigars at some times of the day or occasions, and I like stronger cigars. Do you find that you can educate customers to not just have their favorite cigar, which they go to, and actually to expand their palate? Because, I don't always drink Cabernet Sauvignon red wine. I like white wine, I like champagne, I like things. And there's so many cigars. I look on some of the American, websites, JR and Thompson and Corona. And, I don't have enough lifetime to smoke all these cigars.
Oh yeah.
But people should just enjoy things for what they are. And I like a mild cigar occasionally. And another point was that General have got so many other brands. You don't want to be sort of competing with your own brands. I mean, Macanudo is known as being a milder cigar generally, and that's great. So stick to what you're really good at.
Yeah, and I think that it is difficult. I try to explain it to people who want to smoke the same cigar every day. I'm like, do you want to eat the same thing every day? Do you want to drink the same thing? Like to your point about the wine, you enjoy something in particular, but you still branch out. So you can get people to kind of expand their palate, but I think it's a little bit more lateral, where if they're a fuller bodied smoker, we can kind of get them onto something fuller bodied that's going to share a similar profile. So, if somebody came to me and they said, I like the CAO Brasilia, what would you recommend for Macanudo? Well, the answer is going to be the Inspirato Green, because there's a lot of commonality between the two of them. But I think the biggest issue is people get set in their ways. They like what they like, and they're hesitant to branch out because they found something that the flavor works for them, or they're consistent, or a whole host of different reasons. But especially when we do events, I think people are more receptive to trying something different, whether it be because they want to expand their palate or because there's a deal on the cigars. Either way, I think it's good for them to kind of branch out. And to your note about having a bunch of different brands and, competing. Yes, Macanudo, it's different from Cohiba or CAO or Partagas or Punch or whatever. But at the end of the day, we're all one big family. So like Rick from CAO or Sean from Cohiba, we're all working for the same goal, and that's to support the company. So if somebody comes to an event of mine and they're looking for something that is a totally different flavor profile. Now, I would argue that with the Inspirato series and some of our core line, there is something for everybody, but if they want something super, super full bodied and we just don't have that to offer, I'll talk about the Punch Diablo, or, I might mention like the CAO Flathead or something, because at the end of the day, it still benefits all of us. It's just, as long as you're enjoying the cigar, and you're kind of expanding your palette, whether it be to Macanudo or CAO or Punch or whatever, that for me is a win. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. I mean, I have a friend who, he's well off, he could afford anything, but he only smokes Cuban Monte Cristos #2.
Okay.
He just has that cigar. And I just, I've given up trying to persuade him to expand his palette. But, I'm sure there are a lot of people who've just had the same narrow range forever, and I feel they're missing so much.
Well, it's so funny because I'll be at an event and somebody will walk in and I'll kind of like make the motion that I'm going to speak to them, and one of the employees is like, "Don't bother. He only smokes this. You will never convert him." And I was like, I appreciate the heads up, but I guess I get being comfortable with a cigar and you like it or you love it and it's just something you've been smoking forever. Like, that's cool, but I agree with you. There's so many good cigars out there. I think we're really in the golden age of cigar smoking. There's so many companies with so many offerings, and I think there's a lot of similarities between cigars. So if you like the Inspirato Orange, whether it be from one of our other lines or another cigar company completely, you can likely find something that's going to be akin to that and still enjoy it. It might not be your favorite, but it's a nice change of pace. And I agree that I think it's beneficial just to try what else is out there.
Thank you.
Great point. Many thanks, Ian, for bringing that up. Right, welcome, my dear brother from Dubai. Such a pleasure to see you on the call. Right, you had a question as well.
Thank you. It's a pleasure always to be here. Laurel, we've been waiting for you. It took you a bit of time to show up, but we're happy you're finally here.
I'm so sorry.
No. It's Reinhard. He was too slow. But sending you our hellos from Dubai. Obviously, I was very excited when I saw this. I've been following you for a long time on Instagram, and we share something in common, if I may say so.
Sure.
I'm very much into the educational part. The Leaf Master is a company that was established about 3 years ago, and we are within an environment that's predominantly Cuban. So when we touched on this market, it was approximately, I would say, 90 to 95% Cuban. And nothing against Cuban, but obviously what we realized is education. There has to be a huge component of education. And I'm not telling you to shift your palate. I'm telling you to open your palate and try different things and enjoy them. You don't wear the same shirt every day. You don't eat the same food every day. Exactly. So that's what we've been doing. And what I love about the sessions that you do and the educational videos that you do is their simplicity. And that's something that I'm very, very, very much focused on. It's not something that you stage. You just sit there and do a video with a very happy, positive, smiling face and great energy, and make it as simple as possible. What's the inspiration? How do you choose your topics? For me, I just wake up and it just comes. But for you, I'm just curious, because I have so many ideas and things I want to do, but I'm just curious as to what's your inspiration when it comes to these things, and how do you go about it?
So originally, the inspiration for starting to do all of these videos was just kind of bringing or shedding a light to cigars that maybe people haven't thought about in a few years. We as a company have been around for quite some time, and Macanudo has been around forever. So kind of bringing attention to these blends that may have gotten forgotten about because everybody wants what's new, what's interesting, what's exciting. And then from there it was, I suppose I kind of get caught up in already knowing what something is, and then I'll have some friends over to smoke and they'll ask me a question that I think there's a simple answer to, but then I realize, well, maybe there's more people than I think that don't actually know the answer to this. And so I never want to approach it in like a condescending or like a preachy way. I'm simply doing these because I want people to, if they don't know, to watch it. Like I did a cutter video the other day, and that was actually because some people had
That's
asked
the one
me
that
about
inspired
it
my question.
on my Facebook. So I do this method with my fingernail because I'm always at a loss for cutter when I'm traveling or when I'm out and about. I have a million cutters and I never use any of them. So somebody had asked me if I could show them how this fingernail method came about. And I was like, yeah, I'll do a video on cutting in general, because I think there's a lot of people who do know, and then there's a lot of people who don't. And then there's the group who probably doesn't want to admit that they don't know as much as they do. So this is kind of a subtle way to go about it. You can watch this 10-minute video and, learn where exactly on a cigar you should cut. What is overcutting? Why does it make a difference? So it's people asking for something specifically, like the cutting video, or people asking me questions just in day-to-day life and kind of getting an idea and saying, there's probably more people that actually don't know the answer to this than I think. And I always try to start the videos with saying, like, you may know this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So that's kind of where the inspiration comes from. And like I said, I very much enjoy cigar smoking in general, and it's great to be on a brand that I can stand behind 100%. So when I do these videos talking about Macanudo, it's because I'm actually excited about it. And I think they kind of exude enthusiasm, and I think it kind of helps other people get excited about it. So it's not just a video talking about, oh, this is the wrapper, that's the binder, that's the filler. You're adding a little history into it, and you're adding a little bit of the educational aspect, because like you, I think that's very, very important in learning. And people who really are into cigars and interested, I think, want to know more of the education behind it.
And the stories. You're so right. You're so right. Excellent. Thank you so much. Really appreciate that.
Thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
All right, many thanks. And since you mentioned inspiration, which is a wonderful point, a great follow-up question on that, which we had from Mario Langella, our dear friend over in the UK. He's watching through Facebook, and he sent a question. Laurel, when Macanudo is thinking about creating a new line, bringing a new expression to the market, is it more important to fill a particular demand from the consumer side, following a particular fashion or a trend that you see within the industry, or is it really to create one by yourself and sort of, putting your flag into the moon, if you will, and be like, this is Macanudo, this is our expression that we want to share with the world, and let's see how it is perceived out there?
It's a really good question. And I think the answer would be both. It kind of just depends on what we're doing, because there are blends that not only for Macanudo, but all of our other lines that we've come up with, like, this is a great blend. We love it. We stand behind it, and we think you will all enjoy it. And that's kind of what happened with the new Inspirato green. It was, we had access to this Brazilian tobacco that, we've used for CAO and some of our other brands. And we said, there's really not a cigar in Macanudo that is Brazilian based. And it wasn't necessarily because people were coming up and saying, oh, Macanudo should do something with Brazil, or Brazil is like the hot tobacco right now. It was something that we created this blend. We thought, this will be amazing. We enjoy it. We think you guys will enjoy it as well. Where on the other hand, our Macanudo M series, which is our flavored line, so we do a coffee and a bourbon, and that was more of a response to not necessarily market trend, but desire for having an infused cigar within the Macanudo line. So I would say both. It just kind of depends on the project we're working on.
We understood. That of course makes sense. And sometimes you gotta see what's out there, and
Mhm.
you're always sort of adapting to the market, and you need to react to what's happening, and trends come and go, right? I mean,
Yes.
even in the cigar industry, at some point everybody was into the big ring gauges and into the
Yes.
70s and even beyond, and then others, once they probably reached a particular point in their cigar journey, going back to some of the more elegant and smaller ring gauges. But as I said, I think everything comes and goes and trends and fades. Is there anything that you sort of see on the horizon, or where you think like this is really something that's going to be big in the cigar industry over the next couple of years?
I think that we would be moving more toward, like, kind of back towards more of the traditional sizes if we're talking sizes. The big ring gauges, like you had mentioned, were really trending for a while. And when I kind of started in the cigar industry, that was really when it started to peak. And I don't see as many companies releasing these huge ring gauge cigars overall. But I also see the trend of kind of Nicaraguan tobacco coming up to be kind of on the front lines of tobacco usage. You have people like AJ Fernandez, who's doing his own thing and then working in collaborations, not only with us, but other companies. And I would say that, I don't know, even 7 years ago, it seemed like Dominican cigars were like the cigars that people sought out. Overall, it's not like Nicaraguan based or Honduran based cigars didn't sell, but right now it seems like Nicaraguan tobacco really is kind of on the uptrend of being like this holy grail of amazing tobacco. And I think we're still kind of on the trend of more unique cigars and sourcing different tobaccos, whether it be from Brazil or Colombia or Indonesia or what have you. So just using these different tobaccos and trying to create these blends that really haven't been done before necessarily.
I'm honored to have Amy and Erica from the TLE podcast on the show yet again. Ladies, you're doing such a wonderful job. I'm always most happy to follow the action over at TLE and listen to your latest podcast episodes. Erica, you had a question. Please bring that one up, and welcome yet again.
Thank you so much, Reinhard. I really appreciate it. And what you're doing here is amazing. I tell you this all the time. And I'm so glad that you have Laurel on here. Because Laurel, I'm a fangirl. You are. I've got to say, I've been smoking over 12 years now, and I've never smoked a Macanudo yet, right?
Okay.
And, I mean, the way your personality, the way that you connect with your people, it's very natural. And I really love it, and I'm drawn to it. And I have never wanted to smoke a certain line as much as I do today now. So, I mean, you're rocking it, girl. Like you're everywhere. Everybody says such amazing things about you. And I just wanted to start off there because, you have to hear it. I wanted to tell you.
I appreciate you're fanning my ego over here.
It's all good. It's all good. So tell me, so if I go up to you, if we're in the cigar lounge and I'm saying, I tell you like, hey, Laurel, I've never smoked a Macanudo. My flavor profile, I love creamy, smooth, no spicy, no pepper. I love the earthy tones, just very like minerally.
Okay.
Like that kind of, and maybe a little bit of acidic. I know that's, very close to being like, spicy. I don't know. I'm still learning all that shit. So if I tell you that, guide me to one of your cigars or wherever you would, if I'm there.
Okay. So you said you don't like spice, but you're okay with having it have like a little bit of that acidity to it.
Yeah.
How do you feel about something you said creamy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would recommend two. The first would be the Inspirato Orange. It's medium bodied. It's got a little bit, sorry, you keep jumping around from people trying to like follow your screen here. So it's got a little bit of like a citrus quality to it. And it is very smooth. You get a little bit of kind of that acidity right when you first light it up, but it smooths out really nicely. It's primarily Honduran tobacco, so it's got a little bit of that earthy quality to it. We're using Ometepe for the filler, so it's going to have a very flavor-forward inner profile, and it's just smooth, a little bit of natural sweetness, a little bit of that citrus, and there's just really a lot going on with it that keeps it interesting. The other one that I would recommend would be the Macanudo Vintage 97. That one is a little bit more difficult to obtain because it's not limited in that we only release it once a year, but we only have so much tobacco from the year 97 that we kind of have a cap on how much we produce each year, but it is released year round. And so that we're using a vintage Connecticut broadleaf Maduro from 97. We're using Brazilian tobacco, Dominican, Nicaraguan blend. So it's very creamy. It's really not spicy at all. You get a little bit of that earthiness and the sweetness coming from that Brazilian tobacco, and it's got crazy smoke production. So if you like a really billowy cigar, that's where it's at. But it's got some of those like cocoa and coffee notes without being sweet. It's more of like a dark roast coffee than it is like a coffee drink or like a coffee cream. So I would recommend that if you're looking for flavor and complexity and creaminess, the Vintage 97 or the orange for sure.
All right, Amy, I need those. Amy's on here too.
Where are you based out of?
We're in Jersey.
Okay.
North Jersey. So
awesome.
Amy's over at Casa de Monte Cristo in Whippany.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah, I've been there a handful of times.
Yes, I actually met you here the first time when you had your last event. So
okay.
We had just transferred to this location, so I had met you.
Yes, that would have been in like,
I think it was
last like November or something.
Yes, the end of November. Yeah.
Okay. Yes, that was the trip that I had to drive in Manhattan, and I was really unhappy about it.
Yes, I remember about it. Yes, so I will definitely be bringing some Macanudos tonight, so Erica could try them out.
Perfect.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, Laura, again, it's a pleasure for me to, like, I'm just so happy that I'm here and Reinhard is doing this, because there have been a lot of people that have been on here and love hearing their story, but you definitely were one of the few that I was like, all right, I want to know this person, because you're dominating. I don't think you realize you really dominate a lot of the industry. Even if you didn't even have Macanudo there, I think you would be rocking it still.
I really appreciate that. I do, because sometimes, if I'm being perfectly candid, I feel like, I don't know, maybe it's just being on the inside and like not seeing it as like other people see it, but I just still feel like I'm just this, I don't know, random cigar girl from the Midwest that does videos occasionally. So it's really cool when I get the opportunity to do things like this. And like I was on Cigar Coop the other day, and like for me it's like, oh my gosh, like I could be on Cigar Coop, like this is so cool. And I think this whole like quarantine thing has been really good for me as well, because I've been able to produce like so many different videos, and honestly been more comfortable in like the Facebook Live setting. Stuff like this where you're having a conversation and somebody's asking you questions, like this has never been a problem for me. But going on Facebook Live and just basically like talking to myself for an hour was very nerve-wracking. So I think that was definitely the silver lining, and kind of getting more comfortable with that. But I really do appreciate you saying that, because sometimes I just feel, I'm like, well, I get invited to these things for the cigar industry, and you have like, I don't know, like Rick, who's my, counterpart for CAO, but he's much more into the blending, and he's been with us forever. So I don't see myself as like being on the same level as Rick, or even like Sean from Cohiba, because he had his own cigar company. I just sometimes feel like people look at me like, well, what do you have to say? So I really appreciate you saying that.
No, you have a lot to say. That's good, and again, there's so many people here that all over the world that know you through social media and what you're doing. So I can't wait to see you know, and be, I'm so happy to be a part of your journey, and I cannot wait to meet you.
Well, hopefully soon. And so is your store, Whippany, is that like where you go hang out?
Yeah, and I'm in the city a lot too.
Okay.
New York, a lot of the Davidoff lounges. Still haven't been to Macanudo. Well, actually, I did once a long time ago, but a lot of other places. I mean, I think you're in Pairing Cigar Bar.
Yes, I've been to Pairing a few times.
You there, and those girls over there are awesome.
Oh yeah, Debbie and Julie, they're the best.
Yeah, they are. So next time you come, we'll make sure that we go wherever you are.
Awesome, I would love it.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, what a pleasure it is that we get to connect through, well, opportunities like the Light 'em Up Lounge, and then have people from all over the world discovering new cigars, new inspiration, probably learn quite a few new information, and get to know wonderful people like yourself, Laurel. So it's an absolute pleasure. Laurel, we had a couple of questions regarding the Macanudo Vintage 97.
Okay.
With the metal bands. So
yes,
here at the lounge was asking regarding the quality control aspect of your humidor's moisture, and Oleg, a dear friend over at Facebook, was asking who created the Vintage 97, and will there be a continued output of these? So give us a little bit of the background story and all the spiel regarding the Vintage 97.
Sure. So the Vintage 97, like I said, we're actually using that Connecticut broadleaf Maduro from the year 97. So kind of a quick little backstory on that is that it was a very, very good year for the Connecticut broadleaf crop domestically. It was just the ideal climate and growing conditions, and it yielded perfect tobacco. So we were able to, acquire it and keep it aging to really create this blend that took a Maduro wrapper and a very complex multi-country blend and just take it and turn it up a couple of notches. So it really lets those flavors that are naturally occurring in Maduros, like, the cocoa and the coffee notes, the creaminess, the little bit of a natural sweetness, and just to really kind of amplify those flavors. So we have our team down in the Dominican Republic that works on Macanudo specifically. And then I'm sure you're familiar with like Benji Menendez. So he was very instrumental in creating some of these Macanudo blends. So the Vintage 97, to be honest, I can't remember exactly what year it was released. But yeah, we've been holding on to those wrappers since actually 97. And it's very similar to the 2006. Same deal. It's that Connecticut shade wrapper. In 2006, that year in particular was really great for that crop. And again, it's kind of like taking the Cafe series and just amplifying it a little bit with that age. Very similar to like spirits, where as you age it, it kind of lets those flavors really just open up, and you're starting to take in some of the flavors of what you're aging it in, whether it be like wine barrels or bourbon barrels or like the tertio process. And as far as vintage blends in the future, I mean, we're only going to have, like I said, we only have so much tobacco. It's not like we can go back in time and, recreate more Vintage 97. So eventually we will not have that tobacco anymore, and we will continue to innovate the vintage blends. I mean, we've got tobaccos from other great growing years that are basically just sitting there waiting to be blended. So we don't have anything necessarily that's hard and fast, like this is the year and this is when it's going to be released. But yes, we will continue to innovate with some vintage blends.
And how about the metal rings? Is that something that you keep using for upcoming editions?
So the metal bands are exclusive to the vintage series, and it was kind of one of those just finishing touches where, for a cigar as beautiful and complex and unique as the vintage series, they wanted to adorn it with something that is going to draw necessary attention to that cigar. So yeah, we really don't do anything else with the metal bands in any of our brands. The only other thing that we did a sort of metal band for was Foundry years ago with Michael Giannini. We had like a little gear on them. But yeah, that's the only thing we're using those bands for. And they really just bring a beautiful presentation to it that kind of makes it stand out on the shelves. And whenever I smoke one, I always feel guilty like throwing them away because I'm like, well, it's too nice to throw away, but I also don't have a use for it. So
I got all of mine.
Nice. What do you do with them, Christian?
I just keep them. I can't throw them away either. I don't know what to do with them.
Yeah, I've had somebody tell me they made wind chimes. Somebody used them as napkin holders. One person had a baby and made a mobile out of them. One guy took a cane and custom fitted it to be able to put the bands to line the cane, which it's like that had to be incredibly heavy. He said it was.
Okay. I'm still trying to decide what to do with it, but I can't throw it away.
Yeah, the same. Like I have them sitting out on like my patio railing, and my husband was like, "What are we gonna do with all these bands?" Like, I don't know, but I don't want to get rid of them.
Yeah, I agree.
Oleg actually just suggested you should do some wedding rings from Macanudo, and maybe some wedding cigars if we're already at it.
Fair enough. Well, they don't. I couldn't even wear it as a ring. They don't fit my finger. I think they're either too big or too small. For people, I feel like women's fingers tend to be a little too small for them, and men's fingers tend to be a little too big for them. So you can't even really use them as a ring. I don't know. They actually do work pretty well as a cigar holder. Not if you put it on its side because it will roll. But if you put it on the top, I mean, I've used it to rest my cigar on 100 times. So I mean, I suppose you can use it for that.
Very nice touch there. Laurel, you mentioned Ricky and Sean quite a few times, and we had both of them on the show, thankfully. Outstanding people, wonderful guys to connect with, and both craftsmen and most passionate cigar aficionados like yourself. Do you connect a lot with them? And who were some other inspirational and instrumental people that really helped you along your way within the cigar industry?
So yes, Rick and Sean, both fantastic people. We get along very well. We actually did an interview. It was the three of us, and it was the first time we'd ever done an interview with the three of us. And it was so much fun because it was a very unique perspective for us to kind of talk about, like, you know, because each of us has a different thing that we bring to the table. And then together, I feel like we're just this, I don't know, like the Justice League, you know, just work very well together. So early on, Rick was kind of a source of inspiration. When I started with General as an event manager, basically my job was to coordinate all these events that he would be at. And I always admired the way he could walk into a room and just captivate the audience and make every single person there feel like they are the only one that mattered. He's terrible with names, so that's probably why he calls everybody bro. Yeah, he just has this really unique ability to make everybody feel like they're special. And it's not fake. I mean, he just exudes this passion and confidence and, you know, welcoming attitude. So I always thought that was very, very cool, and I always try to emulate it early on. And then eventually being offered this position, I feel like it paid off pretty well. But he's always been a big supporter of mine. You know, I would do an interview or something, and he'd call me and be like, "Oh girl, that was so good, like you're doing such a good job, I'm so proud of you." He's like my cigar dad. He's the best. So yes, luckily early on, I had a pretty close relationship with Rick because I did get to work with him a lot on a one-on-one basis, more so than any other person at the company. And then when Sean came on, we were both in this position. And unfortunately, the three of us don't get much opportunity to work together beyond like big multi-vendor festivals. You know, we're pretty far removed as far as seeing each other in person, but we stay connected. We're kind of on our own little island. We're in a very unique position in the company where we're not quite sales, we're not quite marketing, and it's like we don't know if like anyone totally understands what we do. So it's nice to kind of have that camaraderie that we're all in the same position and be like, so what are you guys doing today? Or like, what did you do in this situation? So it's really nice to have those people. And I would say as far as like inspirations in the industry, prior to my time at General, for me, it was a lot of our sales reps, because those are the guys you would see on a weekly basis or a daily basis. And just their hustle and their knowledge. And yes, at the end of the day, it is a job. You're out there to make money and, you know, to a point benefit yourself, but the camaraderie, not just between them and other people at their company, but the industry as a whole, you know, other reps from competing companies coming in, be like, oh, how are you? It's been weeks since I've seen you. Let's sit down, have a cigar, have a drink. And really just taking a career and making it a passion and making it fun and making it something that was bringing you joy and bringing you happiness. I mean, you spend so much time working. You know, they say if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. That's not true. You still work, but it makes it a lot easier. I mean, I can honestly say that I love my job like 95% of the time. Sometimes I get cranky when I have to wake up at like 3 a.m. for a flight. Sure. Or, you know, you miss a flight because your plane is delayed and you're stuck in the airport for 7 hours, or, you know, there's crazy storms and you have to rent a car and drive 7 hours from LaGuardia to Buffalo. I'm not salty about that, but sometimes that happens. And so obviously there's aspects that aren't ideal all the time, but I'm very lucky to be in a position that I very much enjoy. And so I kind of looked to those guys saying, you really love what you do and you exude passion, and that's really cool, and I want to do that.
With the people that you mentioned that were inspirational to your journey, and Sean and Rick and some of those other guys who always accompanied you, what would you say were some of the most important qualities, work ethics, and characteristics that all those people bring to the table?
I would say the first one would be authenticity, because if you're out, authenticity and standing behind the brand. I mean, if you go out and you don't enjoy the cigars you're smoking, or you're not, you know, jumping in with 2 feet and supporting the brand, I think very quickly people can realize that. So it's finding what's right for you, not taking a position just to take a position, taking something or pursuing something that you know is going to benefit you, because ultimately if you like what you do and you stand behind what you do, you're going to do it better. And so being authentic, people can tell if you're fake, people can tell if you don't care, finding what's right for you, and then also being able to be both an introvert and an extrovert. And maybe that sounds silly, but I have to be very extroverted for this position. And in general, I am a very extroverted person. Our sales meeting this year, actually, one of our reps asked me, they're like, are you always just this on, or is this just a show when you're doing events or hanging out with us? I'm like, no, I mean, what you see is what you get. This is my personality to my friends, to my family, to whoever else. But it's also being comfortable being alone. There's a lot of times on the road where you're spending hours a day by yourself, whether you're eating meals by yourself, you're spending time in your hotel by yourself, you're spending time on the airport by yourself, and being able to be comfortable with that and still maintain your relationships with friends and family, and being able to do your job, and, you know, kind of doing that work-life balance thing, which sometimes is not as easy as other times. But there's nothing more satisfying after, especially like a smoker festival where you're speaking to literally thousands of people, just going out to dinner and bringing a book and sitting by yourself and just being completely comfortable with it. There's, you know, I hear all the time people asking, oh, what do you have to do to become a cigar rep? You know, what does it entail? And, you know, I don't try to be rude, but like knowing some of these people, I'm like, not everybody can do the travel. Not everybody can be the front facing, like energy, you know, just super extrovert driven person. Like you might have a good personality, but I think it takes a very specific person to be able to do that, if that makes sense. You have to find that balance of being just with people all the time, but then also equally as comfortable by yourself.
Mm. One question, of course, Laurel, that people are curious about quite a bit, and Steve in particular was asking that if you're not smoking Macanudo, what other cigars do you really enjoy?
So outside of Macanudo, speaking to our brands, I very much enjoy the CAO Cameroon. I smoke a lot of the Hoya Day Tradition and the Hoya La Amistad that we did in collaboration with AJ, our La Gloria Collection Reserva. Other companies, around Christmas time, Fuente does their Añejo series. So like they do an 888, which is like a Lancero Bellicoso sort of size, and I absolutely love that. I'm a big Lancero person. Southern Draw does the Rose of Sharon in the Lancero, so I very much enjoy that one as well. I was trying to think, when I was in retail, I smoked like a ton of Perdomo, a ton of Ashton, Crowned Heads, their Las Calaveras limited releases. The Les Bijoux from my father is one of my favorites. So I try to stay current on what else is out there. If there's something new and popular and people are talking about, like, I remember when Drew State released their Florida Sungrown, everybody was talking about the Florida Sungrown and everybody was out of it. I was like, I just need to try one of these freaking cigars already. But yeah, I mean, there's still other cigars that I enjoy, like the Padron 1964. I'm always waffling whether I prefer the natural, the Maduro. I think it just depends on my mood. But yeah, there's a whole array of cigars that I still very much enjoy, and I'd be lying if I said that I didn't smoke other stuff. So.
Well, thanks for sharing that, obviously, and you know, there's so much great stuff out there, and I'm pretty sure you have to smoke quite a bit of Macanudo cigars in order to keep up with that. So it's challenging, right? I mean, quite a few manufacturers also say that, you know, it's tough if you gotta test smoke certain blends and new lines coming out. You know, you rarely find time to really sit back and enjoy somebody else's cigar. Just
90% of what I smoke is Macanudo. I mean, it is what it is. Like, there's only so many hours in the day. There's only so many cigars you can smoke. And kind of on the note of smoking other stuff, I think I'd be doing myself a disservice not smoking what else is out there. Because if somebody comes to me and they say, well, I really enjoy this Ashton VSG, what do you have that's similar? Well, I've never smoked that. If I don't have any familiarity with it, then how am I going to talk to you about my blends? So there's the enjoyment aspect of it, and there's also the kind of like market research aspect of it.
Laurel, it's been such a wonderful conversation today, and we're almost 90 minutes into our call. I can't thank you enough for taking the time, joining us, sitting down with us, smoking a cigar with us. It's such a pleasure, and all the insights that you shared with us, and the wonderful comments you also made about Rick and Sean and all the wonderful people in the industry. I mean, kudos to you as a team, kudos to you for everything that you do. And we can only wish you continued success and all the very best for your new endeavors. Before we wrap things off, I would like to let all of you know that next week, of course, we're going to be back Wednesday, another exciting Light 'em Up session next week. And our special guest next Wednesday will be Alejandro Turrent. So there's going to be some very interesting Mexican cigar conversations to be shared here. Please tune in again. Make sure that you follow all the action through Cigar Journal or Reinhard page and Light 'em Up. Laurel, I've got one final question for you.
Yes.
As always, well, I mean, still you are such a young, enthusiastic cigar expert and the cigar girl, as you mentioned before. Looking ahead and looking into the bright future that is ahead of you, what would you like your personal fingerprint to be on the cigar industry, and what would you like to sort of look back as your legacy that you will leave with the cigar industry?
Wow, look at you. That's a great question. I feel like I'm on a good track to doing what I'd want to do. My goal really is just to bring people together, whether that be getting them to try a Macanudo, maybe something they haven't smoked in a while, but just getting people to open up to new experiences. And as far as like what I would like my fingerprint to be, I would love to get a little bit more into the blending aspect of it. I'm part of the blend selection panels for not only Macanudo, but our other brands, as well as like Rick and Sean and some of our other marketing people. But to be able to kind of have a blend that's my own. That's what I'd like. You know, nothing crazy. Just people to come together and enjoy cigars, whether it's, like I said, Macanudo, or if I can educate people and they can learn a little bit something new. Maybe it's as simple as where on the cigar you should cut, or something more complicated like why does the aging process in tertio make a difference in the flavor? I don't know. If somebody can take something from what I'm saying and really keep it with them and continue to use that in their cigar journey, I feel like I'm really doing my job. And I would love my stamp to be kind of just having people feel connected to the industry or to the brand, and then, you know, being able to kind of try my hand a little bit more into the blending aspect.
What a wonderful statement. Many thanks for that. Laurel Tilly from Macanudo Cigars, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you at the Light 'em Up show. Thank you all for tuning in, and be safe until next week. I'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you so much. Great evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.